Am I a good person? Most of us would say that we're good people. We measure the standard of our living based on the fact that we live pretty good lives. You might assume that you're just a good person, but there are a couple problems with that type of thinking. First of all, how do you measure your goodness? Many of us, when we say we're good, what we're actually saying is, well, at least I'm not as bad as that other guy. The problem is that other guy might look at you and say the exact same thing. They might say, well, at least I'm not as bad as him. You and that other individual have two completely different measurements of goodness. And the problem is, if you both have different measurements of goodness, how do either one of you know that you are good? Isn't goodness at that point whatever you feel like? Don't we instead need some measurement outside ourselves to tell us what is actually good? In the Bible, a rich man calls Jesus good, and Jesus responds, well, why do you call me good? There is no one who is good except God alone. So therefore, we cannot create our own measurements of goodness. The only measurement of good, according to Jesus, is God himself. Secondly, do you continue being good even when you break your own rules? Let's say you wanted to buy a new car. You go to the dealership and you have something in mind, kind of practical, but the salesperson talks to you and he says he can get you an even better car for a fraction of the price. Most of us would jump at an opportunity like that. There's a catch, the salesperson says. This car works great 99% of the time, but 1% of the time, the car won't start at all. So that means for every 100 times you try to start the car, one of those times it won't work at all, potentially stranding you somewhere you don't want to be. You probably would say, no thanks, I'd rather have a car that starts 100% of the time. Why? Because if a car doesn't start, if it's not reliable, then it ceases to be a car. It becomes basically a very expensive little house on wheels. You need a car that works 100% of the time. And if it doesn't, well, then you probably wouldn't call it a good car. That's what it's like with our goodness. We can be good 99% of the time, but that 1% of the time we're not good makes us into something other than good. Being good means you're good 100% of the time, not just when it's easy or convenient or makes you look good. So if we can't depend on our goodness, upon what can we depend? The Bible says that there is one person who lived a perfect and truly good life, Jesus Christ. So we no longer depend on our goodness, but rather we depend on the goodness of Jesus Christ, turning our backs on what Jesus Christ calls not good and turning towards him, committing our lives to following him for the rest of our existence.